This is the latest update on Lily and Jack. It pulls back the curtain on how investigators have been working the case, what they've checked, and where things stand now. If you want to stay on top of every development and help keep the spotlight on this search, please subscribe and turn on notifications. Every extra set of eyes on this story matters. Late court filings that were released to the public this week give a clearer picture of what the Nova Scotia RCMP have done so far. The records are redacted in parts, but they still show the scale of the work. Dozens of requests for records, careful pulls of phone and bank data, and an early investigative posture that, as of mid-July, did not treat this as a confirmed criminal case. That doesn't mean investigators have stopped treating the disappearance seriously. Far from it. The documents make clear that police have thrown resources at the problem. Thousands of videos, hundreds of tips, repeated searches of difficult terrain, and multiple steps to verify timelines and statements. The public remains understandably anxious. These papers show both how methodical the RCMP have been and how many questions still remain. Here's what the records say and what it all means. Lily and Jack were reported missing on May 2nd. The 911 call came at 10:01 a.m. from their mother, Malia Brooks Murray, saying the children had wandered away from the family's home in Lansdowne Station. RCMP arrived at the scene 26 minutes later. That short window between the call and arrival marks the start of the formal search and the start of a timeline investigators are trying to lock down. The family's property sits in an area of dense forest and rough ground. Because of that, searchers immediately treated the situation as urgent. They launched an extensive grid search that covered more than 8 square kilometers and included wells, abandoned shafts, and waterways. Hundreds of people volunteered, and official search teams used helicopters, drones, and trained dogs. Those early searches were thorough and hard work. Volunteers and search professionals scoured ravines and pipelines, walked woodlines and creek banks, and returned again and again to the same routes. Terrain in that part of Nova Scotia is not forgiving. Thick undergrowth, fallen trees, and deep cover slow progress and make it hard to see small evidence. The early hope that the children might be found quickly faded as searches over several days turned up remarkably little. An impression casting of a boot print in a pipeline trail, a pink blanket found by relatives near the road, and a fragment of that same blanket found in a garbage bag at the end of the family driveway. Those two pieces, the boot print and the blanket, have become central physical touchpoints in the investigation. Both have been submitted for forensic testing. They matter because, in a case with otherwise little to go on, even small physical traces can point investigators to new leads. At the same time the ground searches were underway, RCMP investigators began collecting digital and documentary records. The newly released court filings show the force filed a dozen record access orders. Those are legal steps used to obtain device data, app records, cell tower locations, GPS information, and bank transactions. The idea is simple. Modern life leaves digital footprints. Where a phone was, what times calls were made, where money was spent, all of these pieces can be cross-checked against what people tell police. The application documents explain that location data from GPS, cell towers, and metadata can tell investigators the historical location of devices. Call and chat logs can show who the adults were in contact with leading up to the disappearance, and transaction histories can help pin down timelines. In other words, police moved early to gather the hard records that either confirm or contradict the accounts given to them. Those steps also included access to an app Brooks Murray used called Text Plus. RCMP asked to see the account because it can show Wi-Fi calls and messages. The documents note that by early July, Brooks Murray had deleted the app because she doesn't need it anymore, but officers were still able to access the account. That kind of thing happens often in investigations. Even deleted accounts and messages can sometimes be retrieved by providers or reconstructed using other records. Police also pulled bank records for the adults in the household, and they requested video footage from highways and toll plazas to check whether the family, or anyone linked to them, had recently traveled out of the province. The Cobequid Pass, toll plaza footage, and other traffic cameras were requested to rule out the possibility that the children had been transported out of Nova Scotia. The filings also show RCMP investigated the possibility that a family member might have driven the children out of Providence. On the night of May 2nd, Brooks Murray called and suggested the children's biological father, Cody Sullivan, might have taken them to New Brunswick. That led officers to check his whereabouts and to ask for footage from the Trans-Canada Highway and from a Dollarama in New Glasgow, where the children were last seen on video on May 1st at 2:25 p.m. CCTV footage often becomes crucial in missing person cases. It establishes a chain of sightings and rules out certain routes or timing. The court papers say RCMP requested footage that could verify where Cody was between late afternoon on May 1st and early morning on May 3rd for the narrow purpose of confirming his location. The documents do not say whether that footage produced new leads, but investigators were clearly thorough in seeking to confirm everyone's movements. The RCMP also used polygraph tests. The records show 6 polygraph tests were conducted in relation to the case. The mother and stepfather took tests separately on May 12th. The children's biological father later took a test, and other family members also underwent polygraph examinations in July. According to the filings, the exams were used to try to rule out the possibility of foul play. At least one investigator commented in the documents that they did not have reasonable grounds to believe a criminal offense had occurred as of July 16th. In other words, the case had not been officially classified as a criminal investigation at that point. The polygraph examinations are often misunderstood by the public. They are not proof of guilt or innocence. They are a tool, a way investigators sometimes use to direct the inquiry, eliminate certain avenues, or confirm that a particular line of questioning should continue. And while police told the public that the tests were passed by some family members, the detailed questions and notes remain redacted in the released documents. What about the parents' statements and timelines? The court records summarize 5 statements Brooks Murray provided to police. They are heavily redacted in parts, but the portions that are visible show a picture of a household with lots of movement in the days before the disappearance. The family ran errands, visited relatives, bought groceries, and drove to New Glasgow on the afternoon of May 1st. Brooks Murray initially said she put the children to bed at 9 p.m. that night, and later changed the time to 10 p.m., small shifts in memory like that are common in the stress of investigation. Martel's reaction to the material in the court filings is telling in its own way. He told reporters he was completely open and transparent with everything, and that investigators know my life inside and out. He said he had taken a polygraph himself, and that it covered whether he had killed Lily and Jack. Martel also said he had no idea Brooks Murray had phoned the RCMP in the early hours to suggest the children's biological father might have taken them. He described falling asleep exhausted after searching all day, saying he remembered sitting on the bed, hugging Malia, and then passing out. Investigators followed up on a lot of threads. They checked family member movements. They interviewed relatives. They took statements from the extended family. The released documents show that several relatives also passed polygraph tests. The RCMP's public stance, as stated by spokesperson Alison Gerard, remains that the disappearance is a very active investigation. Gerard told CBC the team is using every available resource to locate the children and determine what happened, and that the Major Crime Unit is leading the work under the Missing Persons Act while continuing to explore all possible scenarios. Those comments reflect what the court filings show. The investigation is broad and methodical. Physical evidence recovered early in the search has received special attention. A pink blanket that family members said belonged to Lily was seized down the road from the home and photographed. Another piece of the same blanket was recovered in a garbage bag in a bin at the end of the driveway, and that fragment was also taken. Brooks Murray told police the blanket, an LOL doll blanket, had been used and sometimes dragged by Lily, and that it had been taken down and placed temporarily by the door to stop a draft. She told investigators she had thrown it out in the days before because the weather was getting nicer, and that parts of the blanket had already been torn off. Martel told media that he had used parts of the blanket to stop the draft, and that the pieces recovered looked like the same blanket ripped apart. RCMP said the blanket is being examined forensically. A boot print found on the pipeline trail was also cast and removed for testing. An investigator's note in the court documents said that the boot print impression found in the woods corresponded to a size 11, and that this measurement is consistent with the boot print located on the pipeline trail in the search area. That comment is technical and does not, in itself, identify a person. It simply records that a foot impression was taken and that it matches a size. But they also must be interpreted carefully. A size match does not equal a person match unless other evidence connects the print to a shoe owned or worn by a specific person. There are hard, emotional details in these files as well. Family members who have been searching and waiting have made repeated public comments that they do not believe the children are in the woods. The idea that the siblings could have wandered and been lost is understandably devastating to some, and many people have organized private searches and vigils to keep the case alive. The RCMP search strategy moved beyond wide, immediate grid sweeps to more targeted lookbacks over the weeks and months that followed, revisiting certain areas when new tips or data suggested a concentration of interest. That is a normal pattern in missing person investigations. A large, rapid initial search for the most likely nearby places, followed by narrower, intelligence-driven revisits as new evidence or leads come in. The documents also underline how the public has been involved. Police say they have received roughly 740 tips and have been working through more than 9,300 video files. That volume of incoming material creates a heavy workload for investigators. Every tip must be logged, triaged, and checked. Every video clip must be reviewed. Modern investigations are often slowed, not because police are inactive, but because the volume of potentially useful information is so large it needs careful sorting. That's why RCMP repeatedly asks that people who have footage, no matter how small it may seem, make it available through official channels rather than only posting it online. Video that is preserved properly and handed to investigators with a timestamp can be of tremendous value. One detail in the files that caught attention was timing. The last confirmed sighting of the children in public, on surveillance at a Dollarama in New Glasgow, was at 2:25 p.m. on May 1st. After that, people in the family and community have memories and statements that place the children at home for the evening. Some statements to the RCMP about bedtimes shifted slightly in later accounts. Those changes are normal in the fog of stress, but they also become points investigators check against digital records. The court papers show RCMP explicitly sought to compare the adults' accounts with device location data and banking records to verify or correct timelines. Those cross-checks are standard investigative practice. Finally, the documents show that, at least as of the mid-July filings, RCMP had not concluded the disappearance was the result of a crime. That raises complicated feelings in the community. Some read that as meaning police were not taking the case seriously. Others read it as a cautious, evidence-based stance by investigators. They do not want to declare criminality without objective reason. In a missing persons case, saying, "We suspect a crime," prematurely can limit investigative options if it causes people to conceal evidence out of panic. Conversely, failing to escalate publicly can undermine trust. That balance is a real challenge police often face. What comes next? The RCMP will continue to test leads. Forensic testing on the blanket and boot print may yield trace evidence. Phone and device metadata will be pieced together to build movement histories for the adults and others the family may have been in contact with. Investigators will continue to evaluate video files and to prioritize tips that appear to fit the timeline or point to locations not yet fully checked. The public's role remains vital. Anyone who has footage, a dash cam, or a memory of an unusual vehicle or person in the area around the relevant times should pass that information to police through official tip lines. This update is a reminder of how painstaking modern investigations are. The redacted court filings show investigators reaching into bank histories, calling on video footage from highways and stores, examining app data, and using polygraphs to structure lines of inquiry. None of these steps is a quick fix. They are slow, methodical, and necessary. And while the documents make it clear police were not calling the case criminal as of mid-July, they also show the force continuing to use every tool available to them while asking the public for help. If you have any information or footage that might relate to Lily and Jack's disappearance, please contact the Nova Scotia RCMP or Crime Stoppers. Even something that seems small to you could be the missing piece investigators need. And if you want continued updates on developments in this story, subscribe and turn on notifications. Staying informed keeps this case in focus and keeps pressure on those who can help. Above all, the priority is finding Lily and Jack and bringing answers to their family and to a community that has been waiting, searching, and hoping.